So, next slide, please. Let me begin by telling you a little bit about my lab, because that sets up the context and the motivation for some of the things we are doing. So this is our lab, Design and Intelligence Lab. There are several faculty in this lab, not just I. One of the faculty members just joined here, David Joyner, Keith McGregor, Spencer Rugaber. They are PhD students. And I've shown some master's and undergraduate students. Actually, the number of master's students right now is about 10 to 12. The number of undergraduate students is about 5. So it's a fairly large-sized lab. And what we do is really cognitive systems. Let me explain what I mean by that, because that will motivate why we are working with Watson. So I started working on artificial intelligence about in the 1980s, mid-1980s. And about the early 1990s, there was an AI winter that I'm sure you have heard about. So at that time, partly because of that, and partly because AI itself was changing, I started looking at issues in cognitive science. So not just a question of how to build intelligent machines that can do interesting things, but how does human mind work, for example, when we do design, when we do complex design. And about 10 years back, I started working on computer-centered computing, so not just building automated systems, but building interactive tools that augment or aid human creativity. And so cognitive systems is the new term for this area that I will think of as human-level, human-centered, knowledge-based AI. And that is what Watson is a tool for. It is human-level, it deals with people, it deals with natural language processing, with aspects of natural language processing, certainly human-centered, and it uses knowledge. So part of the reason why we're looking at Watson is because Watson is a tool for constructing knowledge systems of the kind that we want to construct, cognitive systems of the kind we want to construct. Now note that Watson itself is not a system. It is a tool for constructing systems. This area of cognitive systems that is both new and old, it's old in the sense that in some sense it's been going on for large, almost since the beginning of AI, and it's new in the sense that it's sort of re-energizing. Watson has re-energized this area over the last 5 or 6 years. So this particular area is very, very large, and we focus on a particular aspect of this area, which we call computational creativity. So computational creativity is the idea of trying to understand what is human creativity, how can we write tools or programs that can aid or augment human creativity, and then in the long term, how can we build AI machines that can be creative in their own rights. So in our lab, we look at human creativity in many areas. One area is system design. We'll talk a little bit about it today. Another area is scientific discovery. We'll talk about that also today. And the third area that we'll talk about today is online education. That's where the live demo is going to be. Now, here is why we started working with Watson in terms of thinking about creativity. Watson itself is not creative. There is nothing about Watson which even remotely comes to creativity. However, we think that Watson can help humans become more creative in the sense that, not that humans are going to suddenly become more creative, but it can spark creativity to conversation. So I can ask you a question, you can give me an answer, I ask you another question, you give another answer, and often creativity lies not in me, not in you, but emerges out of the conversation between us. In a similar manner, if you're conversing with Watson, then we hope, our hypothesis is that a conversation with Watson can lead to new questions that the human may not have thought about earlier. And often the creativity lies not in finding an answer, but in asking the right question. Our other hypothesis is that, well, question answering occurs all over human life. Can you give me some example where you ask questions and somebody gives an answer? Where does question answering occur? Sorry? Help desks. Okay, help desk. So one great example. Where else? Law firms. It occurs. So lawyers are constantly asking. Discovery is the process of question answering. Give me more examples. Education. I hope you ask your professors questions. And I hope professors give answers. If you're not asking questions, the professors are not giving answers, that's not good. Good education is not going on. In fact, in the Socratic method of education, which is largely discourse-based, it's largely about questions and answers. Okay. Research. We all do research here, and research is largely about questions and answers too. If you're doing your PhD, for example, or your master's, one of the things your advisor will ask you is, what is a research question? You have to have a research question. So you ask questions, and doing research is finding an answer to some question. So there is a very large number of human fields in which are really based on this notion, this metaphor of question answering. But many times, often, finding the answer takes a lot of human effort. Help desk is an example of that. So can we automate some of those processes for question answering that will then save human time and effort? So that's our second hypothesis. And we'll show you examples that will test both of these hypotheses. So we'll talk about 3 projects today. The first project was in the spring 2015, so about a year back, in the Computational Creativity class last year. And that when we used Watson for question answering and biologically inspired design. We'll show you demos in a second. The second project is in Computational Creativity class. It is going on right now. So this is all really happening right now. And the third project is an online class on knowledge-based AI, in which there are 300 students taking the class. It's a part of the OMSCS program, and our live demo will be from that. And with this, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Bryan.
Thank you, Ashok. Okay, so I am going to present on our use of Watson in spring 2015 in a computational creativity class, like Ashok just mentioned. Ashok was the professor of this class, and I was the TA. By the way, I'm Bryan Wiltgen. I'm a PhD candidate here at Georgia Tech in computer science. So in this class, we had teams break up into groups of 4, and we had 6 teams. You can see their names on the top of this slide. And their goal was to deeply address problems in computational creativity in the context of biologically inspired design. Now, for brevity, we're not going to talk about biologically inspired design today, but suffice it to say it's a novel design activity where you make analogies to nature to address your design problems. And their objective was to design an application, an app, that could help support computational creativity, and IBM's Watson had to be a part of it. It didn't have to be the whole thing, it just had to be a part of it. So given that, what I'm going to show you is a video that one of our teams created at the end of the class of their project to sort of demonstrate what are these projects even like. Let's go to the video. Okay, it's about 5 minutes long.
Erasmus is a design research tool intended to augment a user's ability to explore technical solution spaces. When faced with complex problems, engineer designers are increasingly required to expand the breadth of their search for insights that might assist them. Optimal solutions might have been captured in academic papers from a diverse set of complex fields, each with their own language and implicit knowledge. With contemporary tools, the search for optimal solutions has improved. Google Scholar quickly locates a set of papers relevant to the user's search, but the target knowledge contained within them can be locked behind arcane language. This model even presumes that the user knows enough to ask the right question. IBM Watson can assist engineer designers in more rapidly iterating their research questions. By quickly providing a precise answer to user questions, Watson shortens the user's search, but much of the language is still arcane to users. Identifying concepts for further exploration still requires domain expertise. Alchemy, another IBM solution, uses natural language processing methods to rapidly extract entities, keywords, and concepts from a text. It displays these results in a series of tree maps that allow users to quickly visualize the relative importance of each logical unit. But an Alchemy user must already have a single text to be parsed, and Alchemy provides no way for users to process its results into further questions. Erasmus joins the strengths of Watson and Alchemy into a single user experience. When faced with a difficult engineering design problem, an Erasmus user can quickly seek answers both within and between 40 disciplines, without becoming a novice in each of the relevant fields. This high-level concept search can save researchers a significant amount of time and improve the diversity of their outcomes. Users can quickly explore a concept space at a high level of abstraction, beginning with a single question about, for instance, why some birds are able to survive on seawater. Behind the scenes, Erasmus generates variations on the user's question, developing a map of the concept neighborhood surrounding that question, then returning a visualization of the concepts embodied in IBM Watson's top answers. Consider, for example, Bryan. Bryan's an engineering designer who's interested in improving desalination techniques. Bryan feels that the desalination techniques used by seabirds hold key insights into the problem, yet he knows very little about how this process works. Without access to Erasmus, Bryan might go to Google Scholar to ask a basic question. He would rapidly and somewhat bluntly screen Google's results by reading a brief abstract and the title of the paper. Bryan opens a new tab for each of the papers that pass his initial screening test. He then begins to scan the abstracts of each paper that he's opened, seeking information that might cue him as to whether or not the paper contains information that would help him on his search. However, many of the abstracts contain terms with which Bryan isn't familiar. Even if Bryan feels strongly that an abstract shows promise, the content of the paper, which is hidden behind a paywall, which Bryan's institution may or may not have access to, may not fit Bryan's needs. Daunted by the prospect of wading through all this arcane language, Bryan decides to turn to Erasmus, no wiser than he was when he began the Google Scholar search. He does, however, know that water, birds, and desalination are central to the concept space that he'd like to explore, but he has no expertise in fluid mechanics, biology, or chemistry. So, to begin, he asks a simple question: how do seabirds desalinate water? Behind the scenes, Erasmus expands on this question, generating variations to better represent the concept neighborhood, then returns a collection of concepts associated with the answers. Now Bryan can see more of the concept space related to these three initial components. What, for instance, is a salt blend? Bryan's curiosity is piqued, so he asks a new question. This further expands the concept space in that direction, demonstrating new, related concepts which might assist Bryan's research. After a sufficient number of questions, Bryan has developed a high-level map of the concepts that occupy the area in which he's interested and the way in which these concepts are connected. With this, he's able to narrow his search to a small set of concepts that seem promising, all without developing unnecessary expertise in the disciplines that cover these areas. Erasmus addresses the needs of sophisticated and influential users who were previously left to cobble together partial solutions from an array of tools. By combining the power of Watson and alchemy while performing some special tricks of his own, Erasmus opens new markets filled with highly sophisticated users, many of whom are supported by large organizations with substantial budgets for investing in research and development tools.
Okay, so that's the Erasmus project, which is a really cool project about concept exploration. But this was just one of the 6 projects. So look, we're going to do a brief sort of summary of what did we find in the class? What were the projects about? And we saw that on the topics, 5 of the projects were about biologically inspired design. Remember, they were all told to do biologically inspired design. But one of the projects, which Brad's going to demo in a second, actually pivoted at some point and became about agriculture. Also, in terms of platform, we wanted them to build apps, but we didn't say what technology we wanted them to use. And so we saw that 2 of the projects were Android applications and 4 were websites. But all of them, obviously, were internet connected because they had to connect back to Watson. And then finally, in terms of interactivity, all the projects enabled human-computer interaction, but I believe 2 of them there enabled human-human interaction. So what these results show us is that saying that you need to use Watson is not a constraint that constrains you in platform or in topic or in interactivity. So it has a very broad application capability. And then finally, at the bottom of the slide, you see a couple of our findings. Ashok already mentioned the idea of having a conversation with Watson. We call this human-computer co-creativity. And this was actually a surprise to us because we came to this thinking about Watson as this Jeopardy computer where it has these independent one-off question answering systems. And technically this is true. Watson has no ability to capture context. But when wrapped by these student projects, Watson now can carry on a conversation with people. And then finally, we had our students talk about best practices. What are the best practices for using Watson? And we got a couple comments here, both on how do you train Watson and how do you give Watson structured data. Now, we've talked a lot about Watson. What is Watson? Next slide, please. So there's a lot said about Watson. What is Watson to us? What is Watson in the context of our class? We were given something called Watson Engagement Advisor. And at a high functional level, Watson Engagement Advisor allows natural language question answering. So you see these are, actually this is an example from our instance of Watson. You can ask a question like, what are the proper conditions for growing ginger? And then on the right side, that's a snippet of Watson's answer to that question, of the best answer to that question. So that's, at a functional level, that's all Watson does, is it lets you do natural language questions and gives natural language answers, which is actually really powerful, because otherwise you'd have to sort of build this thing on your own. Next slide. So let's peel a layer of the onion off. What is Watson behind the scenes to us? Watson is or our engagement advisor at least, is a web interface that lets you apply natural language questions and does retrieval of snippets of natural language documents that you've uploaded to it. So Watson doesn't do this version of Watson doesn't do any language generation. It's retrieving document snippets. And so this is the web interface. It's also a REST API, which is what the projects use to connect behind the scenes. So this thing has 3 parts. It has managing a corpus and training Watson and then testing. I'm going to talk about the first 2. Next slide, please. So this is what's in the corpus. The corpus contains natural language documents. They can be Word documents or PDFs that are very textual PDFs or websites. These are the startings of 2 example files. And they're sort of good examples because they're the kind of thing Watson expects. Watson expects clear delineations between headers and body text and titles and things like that. And although this slide didn't use it, what we were told by IBM was to tag our documents in terms of applying styles like header 1, header 2, body text, stuff like that. And as you can see, we have the stat here. Our students uploaded about 595 files to our Watson corpus in this class. There's a couple that are test files from me, but that's a lot of files. So our students did a lot of work during the class. Next slide. Okay, now training. Once you uploaded these documents, you want to train Watson, which teaches it how to answer the questions the way you think they should be answered. And the way you do this is you ask it in this training interface questions that represent the kind of questions you expect your users to ask. So here, this question is, what are proper conditions for growing ginger? And you ask it, and then it gives you an ordered list of all the answers that it thinks could answer this question. You select it. Now you're matching question and answer pairs. And you see there at the bottom, there are other questions that are clustered with this. So you can also pose alternative formulations of the same question to say, oh, Watson, if they said this, it means this question, which I've already trained you on. So behind the scenes, this is how you set up Watson to be able to answer your questions. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brad, who's going to give a demo. Brad was also in this class. He's now part of our research team. And he's going to demo the project that his team worked on. Sure.
Hi, my name is Bradley Sheneman. I was a student in Ashok's Computational Creativity class last spring. And I'm currently a master's student working in the DILab this semester. Well, I'll give you a little overview of the application that I'm going to demo while setting it up. So basically, Wasabi was designed to be an agricultural assistant. And basically what this means is that it was a tool to help farmers make decisions about what and when to plant, for example, given growing conditions, weather, information about crop diseases, or perhaps even what other farmers were planting in the same season, because that could affect them economically. So let's jump right into the demo then. You can see that there are 2 main components to our application. One is a forum, which I'll talk about later, and the other is a homepage with a list of conversations. Now, you can think of a conversation as, well, most importantly, it's a way for the user to interact with Watson. But also, it was designed as a place for the user to store relevant information that it found during that interaction for a particular task or goal that they have. So say, for example, that our user is a farmer in Rwanda, and he's created a project or a conversation called Intercrop Banana, where he's basically trying to figure out something that he can plant alongside his existing banana crop, say to maximize his profits or improve his yields. Now, I'm going to have to put this down for a second. So if we get right into asking some questions. So, the first obvious question that he might ask is, what can I intercrop with bananas? And so Watson returns an answer in the chat box. And so he sees some information about crops that he might be able to intercrop with bananas that other people have used for various reasons. And say maybe coffee catches his eye. So he'll go in and say, that sounds interesting. What are the benefits of intercropping with coffee? Once again, Watson returns an answer. And he goes through and he says, well, maybe this seems like a little bit too much information. I'm going to try to narrow down my search a little bit, because this particular response was quite large. So he looks over on the sidebar. Now, basically what this is as Bryan was talking about earlier, Watson actually returns a number of different answers, each with an associated confidence. The answer that appears in the chat box is the one with the highest confidence, but he also suggested a number of other answers, and you can see there the associated document titles as well for those answers. So he looks over on the side and he says, well, given that I'm a farmer in Rwanda, maybe this first one will be a little more relevant to me. So he asks about that. And now he gets a little blurb about, that was actually an excerpt from a study that was done about coffee intercropping in Rwanda. So say he says that this looks like particularly relevant information, so he clicks this button and it's saved on the side. Now he could obviously go through this for many hours or even come back to the project later on a later day and come back and look at kind of the results of his search and the information that he found relevant before. And this would sort of compile everything together. Now, say that Watson was not able to answer a particular question that he asked. It didn't return any answers with any confidence. Well, then the answer would be posted to the forum. The forum is a place for farmers to ask and answer questions. Our goal is basically to take advantage of the knowledge of our user base and use that as information to train Watson. So if Watson doesn't know the answer, it'd be posted to the forum, and a human user, an expert, would answer the question. Now, so let's just click on one of these. And we'll come to the forum page for this question that was asked before and the corresponding answer that was given by some other user. We'll see that there's, you have the ability to upvote or downvote answers. So this was essentially our method for curating the data. Because it all happens kind of in this automated loop, the goal is to look at answers that only have, for example, a large number of upvotes, and that would hopefully be some indication of how useful the answer was for people. So we would only train Watson on the most useful answers, the ones with the greatest number of upvotes. So that's all I have for you right now. And so while Wasabi was a concept application, you'll actually see a live working example of a similar forum-based application later on in the presentation when we talk about the virtual TA. Thank you.
This was a demo of a live Watson.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. Hi everybody, I'm Divya Vijayaraghavan, and so I was part of this computational creativity class last spring, and Brad and Bryan, they gave an overview of the kind of projects that the students in the class they did in combination with IBM Watson. So I'm the TA for this class this semester, and I'll give a brief overview about the kind of projects that we expect the students to do in this class this semester, and the systems which they'll be using to build applications. students, and also the goal and the focus for the computational creativity class this semester. So the class this semester, it comprises of 27 grad students and 4 undergrad students. So the primary focus last semester was on biologically inspired design. So all of the groups and all of the applications, so they were in the scope of biologically inspired design, and they were based on a corpus of about 500 biologically inspired design articles that were available for the class. So this semester we have decided to move the focus to a more broader area of scientific modeling and discovery, and we also hope to provide like a more complex data source for them to build applications which have like which can solve like real world problems. So with that aspect, so we have the data that the students of the class they're going to be using is data that's going to come out of Encyclopedia of Life, so which is like an online, it's one of the largest data sources of that has information about like 1.9 million species of animals on Earth, and it's a very large online data source that's freely accessible and available to everybody, and it's a rich digital resource and content of information. So the first system that we'll be providing for this class is Mila. So it's one of the projects in DILab and which have been associated with. This is a system that aids scientific modeling and discovery. So this is an agent-based modeling and simulation tool that helps citizen scientists and biologists to build conceptual models of ecological phenomenon, and then to see like simulations of them and the models being simulated over time. So this is an example of a conceptual model. So human beings, they're very good at building conceptual models of different phenomenon, and this is a model of a simple food chain, a predator-prey food chain. And so we can see that it has like different components, and we can see the effect that it will have on the various other components in the model. So these kind of models are very easier to create. And the next slide. So this is the simulation that's produced by the system. So these two are like separate entities. So we have like a lot of systems which enables us to build conceptual models, and we have like a lot of simulators that are available using which you can do some simulations. But there are very few tools that provide like the kind of capability that Mila does. That is the strength of Mila. It lies in its ability to translate these conceptual models and provide simulations of them, and it shows like temporal evolutions of the various parameters involved over time, and it's a very simple but powerful tool that aids in scientific modeling and discovery. And so the process is like you can construct a model, and then you can use the model, and then these simulations they provide like a feedback based on which you can go back and revise your model. So this is like an entire cycle. So this is one of the systems that that's available, and so the students can leverage this tool, or they can build on this and then come up with their own creative ideas for building the applications in class. Okay, so I'll just give a brief overview of what Encyclopedia of Life is. So it is it's been done by the Smithsonian Institute, and so they have been doing this project for a couple of years now. And so it is a collection of it's a online repository and a collection of like a vast amount of data which is collected from like different various content providers and digital resources. And so they have like data about 1.9 million species that are known on Earth, and their main goal is to like to increase the awareness about the kind of knowledge that is available, and also make them easily accessible, so as to enable discovery. And so they have like a concept called taxon pages. So for every species of animal, they have like different taxon pages that provides comprehensive data, and they've collected it over from different content providers, and it's all like trusted digital resource of data. Okay, so we, as I said earlier, so they have like a huge amount of data. So we have about like just URL links for all the HTML pages of these taxon pages. It's about like we have 1 GB of data. And what we are planning to do is we are planning to extract all of these HTML pages and then upload them into Watson, so that all of this data is available in the Watson corpus to enable training, and also to provide that as a foundation and to build like projects on top of it. So this is a sample that I tried out, like how you can use this UOL data. So we collected a sample of about like 30 biodiversity articles from the UOL site, and then I uploaded it into the Watson corpus, and I trained a couple of questions. And this is our goal. So we plan to extract all of the information that are available as taxon pages, and then put it into the Watson corpus so that we can train. And then this will be like a foundation on top of which students can come up and build creative applications. So we hope that students will come up with creative and innovative projects by leveraging these three powerful systems that will support scientific modeling and discovery. And so that's the goal for the class. And so we hope that they'll come up with interesting applications like how the students of last semester's class did. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Lalith. I'm a master's student, and I'm going to talk to you about our work to use Watson to build a virtual TA. I think the arrow keys work. There we go. Cool. So first, here's some information about the course that we're using for this project. The course is called Knowledge-Based AI. It's offered on campus and online. In the online version of the class, students watch 26 video lessons over the course of a semester. So that amounts to about 2 to 3 videos each week. And there are 300 students. Interaction in the online class takes place through a Piazza discussion forum, T-Square, and a peer feedback tool. In this presentation, I'll talk about the Piazza discussion forum. So here's what a Piazza forum looks like. In the online class, the video lessons are like the textbook, and the Piazza forum is like the classroom. This is where students can ask questions, discuss topics with each other, and also give us feedback. So here's in this screenshot, you're seeing a student ask a question about a word limit on an assignment. How long should an assignment be that they're about to turn in? So overall, the participation in Piazza for the online class is much higher than the on-campus class. So here are 4 metrics of participation: total number of posts, total number of contributions, so that's like replies or follow-ups to a post, instructor responses and student responses. And then on the top, I'm comparing the on-campus version of Knowledge-Based AI in fall 2015 and the online version of the class also in fall 2015. And on all 4 metrics, the numbers are higher for the online class. One challenge this creates for TAs is keeping up with all these posts. On one hand, it's challenging to reply to each of these posts individually, but on the other, we have data that shows that the quality of the TA is really important for students' experience in a class, and that involves timeliness of responses and thoroughness of those responses. So it turns out that some of the questions that students ask are frequently asked and about the more routine parts of the class. In this slide, what I'm showing is, so going back to the early example about the question about word limit, turns out that question has been asked every semester since this class has been offered since fall 2014. And they're all phrased in different ways. So if there was a way to automatically answer these questions without having a TA to get involved in them, perhaps it could free up the TA to engage in some of the more open-ended discussions. So the research question is, can we do automated question answering on these routine questions? So this is Watson. To do this, we're going to use Watson, and Watson is a question answering system. This is a diagram, an architecture diagram of its question answering pipeline. I'm not going to explain all of it, but at a high level, a question goes in, it passes through this pipeline, and an answer comes out. I do want to draw your attention to the beginning part of the pipeline, the red box that's outlined that says question and topic analysis. One of the first things that Watson does when it gets a new question is it tries to classify it. And based on that classification, it can determine what knowledge sources to search and what search strategies to use and so forth. So we're using Watson's question classifier in our system to answer student questions. So here's a diagram of how that works. So when a student asks a question on Piazza, we're using Watson's question classifier to label that question. We take that label, and then we use that as a query to a database of pre-written answers that match labels to answers. And then we return that answer to students. So let me show you a demo of how this all works.
Now this demo is a live demo. This is on the piazza for the class happening right now.
So I've created an empty Piazza forum for the sake of this demo, and I have taken 2 questions that were actually asked in the spring 2016 version of knowledge-based AI that's happening right now. So here's one of those questions. Word limit on assignments. The question has happened again, and I understand there's maximum word character limit, but is there a minimum word limit? So I'll go ahead and post this question. All right, cool. So the question is posted, and then our system can automatically answer that. Jill Watson replies, there isn't a word limit, but we'll grade you both on depth and succinctness. And this can happen right away as a student responds. Let's do one more example. This question is about using external libraries. So in assignments, students can use, in this version of the class, students can use external libraries, but every so often we get questions on what libraries can they use and so forth. So here's the question about that. So I'll go ahead and post this too. All right, cool. And let's answer that question. Cool. So Jill says that for this class, the only version that they support is NumPy. So this hopefully will free up TAs to focus on some of the more in-depth and more thoughtful discussions, while these routine aspects can be automated away. Let me go back to the presentation. All right, cool. So far I've shown you just one type of question that students ask in the online forum. That's routine questions. That's item 2 on this slide. But there are other types of questions that students ask. And 2 other types are logistical questions and deeper questions. So logistical questions are questions like are relevant to the current iteration of the class. So when is this assignment due? Where's the link for the syllabus? What are we doing about spring break? So that information can usually be found in the course syllabus or the course calendar. So perhaps we can use Watson to take that information, process it, and return those answers. Another type of question is deeper questions that require more explanation about elaboration on a course concept, or an explanation of why we design things, why the course is designed in the way that it is. And for those questions, perhaps we could also use Watson perhaps to search over all previous posts that TAs in the past have given, and then suggest that to TAs of the current semester to give forward. So in summary, we can use different parts of Watson for different types of questions, and I've just shown you one aspect of that. So at this point, I'll just turn it over to Brad for the rest of what we're doing.
Okay, thank you, Lalith. So one of the things that we're doing to address some of these questions, in particular number 3, the deeper questions, is to take advantage of our data more, make better use of our data. So before I go into details on that, let me just give you a quick overview of the training process for Watson as it relates to this current application. So initially, all of our data comes from Piazza, as Lalith was talking about. What we do is basically we will take posts and responses from Piazza and compile those into corpus files, which we then upload directly into Watson. What we also do is we'll take a list of training questions, which are essentially the questions, or some of the questions, that we hope that our virtual TA will be able to answer automatically on the forums. We submit those to Watson, and then Watson comes back with a list of potential answers, each with an associated confidence level. And in the base version of Watson, the correct answer is selected, or the most correct answer is selected by a human expert. And if there isn't a correct answer, or if Watson doesn't return anything, then the question is just discarded. And then I guess there should probably be an arrow back, but the selected answer is then used to train Watson. Now, this works fine for many applications, but things are a little bit different for us. So we do have a lot of expert data in the form of answers from TAs and instructors and even knowledgeable students, but it would be impractical to ask these people to train the system, for example. This is for two main reasons. One, we have an enormous amount of data, and if you think about it, it would be counterproductive to ask our TAs, for example, to train Watson, given that the whole purpose of our system is to save our TAs time, to reduce their workload. So it doesn't work for that reason. The second reason, and possibly the less intuitive one, is the fact that the data itself is dynamic. What I mean by that is, over time, things like course materials, schedules, or even the goals and the structure of the course itself might change, from semester to semester, and there isn't really a clear way of dealing with that right now with a Watson-based system. So we have to adapt our system somewhat. Now, one of the things that we've done to start addressing these problems is to build a web API that essentially automates the entire process of training Watson from start to finish. So everything from uploading training questions to creating and uploading corpus files to selecting answers can be done without human intervention. This is great for one thing because it helps us deal with the data problem. We have a lot of data, now we can churn through it much faster. It helps to deal with that one issue that I mentioned earlier. For the most part, it should make sense. Uploading training questions, reformatting data, and uploading it shouldn't be a problem to automate. But one thing that might strike you as a little odd is this thing on the side. You can go ahead. Selecting answers. How can you select the correct answer without a human in the loop? Now, the short answer to this is that you can't guarantee that it's going to be the correct answer, but the more interesting answer is that it's an open research question that we're exploring, and we have a number of different things that we've been trying out for this. Now, the first, you can go back. The first and probably the simplest is to just select the answer that Watson returns with the highest confidence. This works just fine for certain types of data. In particular, situations where there aren't a lot of different questions that sound similar but have different meanings, or and situations where the answer itself is correct, because as I mentioned before, we're taking our data directly from Piazza, and the answers that people post might not actually be the right answers. We don't want to train Watson on incorrect data. Now, one of the things that we can do to alleviate this problem is to take advantage of the metadata that's associated with Piazza posts. So, for example, we can tell whether a response was posted by an instructor or by a TA or by a student. So, for example, we might give preference to answers given by the TAs or even by the students. Obviously, we would like to run tests to figure out which answers are more appropriate and for which kinds of questions. And Piazza also has an endorsement system. They also have a thing that's sort of like an upvote system where people can say thanks for an answer. And if it gets a lot of upvotes, then we might give preference to those answers as well for training. There are a lot of other ways of addressing this question, but all of these remain open research questions that we would like to continue exploring into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So we began with two hypotheses. Let me return to those two hypotheses. So the first hypothesis was that GT Watson Plus, which is what we call our set of Watson-based tools, can save human effort at question answering, for example, in education and training. And we showed you an example of Jill Watson as a virtual TA currently on Piazza Forum for the online class, which is, we hope, in the long term, going to save a lot of TA effort. The second hypothesis was that interactions with GT Watson Plus may aid human creativity, and we showed you two examples of that. The working example is from biological inspired design, but the one that we're hoping to build this semester is on scientific discovery. Let me quickly share the status of the three projects with you. Where are these projects? How mature are they? So the first project, which was last year's project, based on last year's computational creativity class, we created these 6 demos and 6 videos for each demo, and we sent them to IBM, and IBM encouraged us to spawn a startup. So in the summer of last year, we did customer discovery supported by a small NSF I-Core grant. The customer discovery indicated that a lot of interest in the application of using Watson for biological inspired design, but we could not immediately find a paying customer. So we have pivoted to a different sector that I'll not talk about right now, but we continue to do the customer discovery for biologically inspired design. And if we can find a customer, we'll spawn a startup. For the second project, ecological modeling, so we have released Mila and EOL and Watson to the students in the class. Actually, Mila has released, EOL and Watson will release in the coming week. And so they will have access to all three of these systems, and it is then these Georgia Tech students' job to do magic with these three systems and do something which uses EOL as the large database, terabytes of information, and Watson as the question answering system to support scientific discovery. And the third project, online question answering, and this is going to remain confidential, and that's why I don't want this particular thing to go up on YouTube just yet. So the OMS students do not know yet that Jill is actually a virtual TA. So there is a TA called Jill, actually on Piazza right now. When we started the semester on January 11th, at that time, Lalith was acting as Jill. So a human TA was acting as, he was just posting his names as well as Jill's name. Earlier this week, we made a switch. So now, in a dummy Piazza, all the questions that come from the students to Piazza go to the dummy Piazza, they go to Watson. Watson answers some of them. Some of the answers at the current level of Watson's performance are really good. Many of the answers at Watson's current level of performance are not very good. So Lalith screens them, and the ones that are really good, he posts those answers to the real Piazza. Now, the students don't know that these answers are coming from Watson. As we go along, we hope to increase Watson's performance to a level where Jill Watson can become live on the Piazza thing. We're not there yet. How long will it take? 2 weeks, 2 months? But before the end of the semester, the performance of Watson is improving every week because we train it more and more. So suddenly, by the end of the semester, I want to release Jill on the real Piazza forum, and I want to find out how long does it take for the students to figure out it's a virtual TA. So that's the experiment, and that's why a degree of confidentiality is required here. We'll not put this tape on video on YouTube for just yet. And I hope there are there any OMSCS students here? Okay, we are safe then. So these are all residential students. So that's the sort of state of practice in the third project. So before I end, let me thank several people. First of all, the entire Georgia Tech Watson research group in DILab. Some of the members are not here. Actually, Spencer is here. Jose Delgado, I saw, was here. And Parul Awasthy is not here, so thank you to all of them. This research is supported by several grants, some internal, some external. The internal grants are IDEAS, which is a Georgia Tech pilot program on very large data. And so the effort to connect with Encyclopedia is a part of that, connecting with very, very large data, and with faculty awards from IBM. Thank you to IBM, thank you to Smithsonian Institution, which has developed the EOL, and thank you also to GVU for inviting us. So we deliberately made this presentation relatively short so that we'll have time for question, answers, and discussion. So, yes, Jessica.
So, I really like this idea of like having humans and then like migrating it slowly over to the machine. Could you foresee, like you guys are looking at like, how it's performing, but have you ever thought of doing any type of assessment of benchmarking how the TAs are throughout the semester and see like if Watson is liked more than people.
Yeah.
If people are liked more, so that you can kind of get like an affinity for, or an idea of the student's affinity for either the man or the machine or the hybrid.
Yeah, good question. So one of the concerns from last year was what was the quality of answers Watson was giving? How do we measure that? So one of the reasons for doing it in the online Piazza this year is that human TAs are the benchmarks. So Jill is another TA, and if the students cannot figure out this Jill is a virtual TA, then in some way we have crossed a threshold. What I can tell you right now is that as Lalith, you can jump in here whenever you want, as Lalith is taking answers from Watson and posting them to the real Piazza, so far students are responding to Jill, and they are not being able to detect that this is answers that are coming from a virtual TA. How far this will go, whether at some particular point students in the class will start appreciating Jill Watson even more than other human TAs are all all open issues. It will be fun to find that out. Yeah. Peter?
Thank you, Ashok. I'm from International Affairs, and my concern is how can we use this in my field? For example, I have a student who asked me just Tuesday, how can I discover the order of battle for all of the battles or major battles in World War II? Because what he wants to do is, well, the order of battle is sort of like, what are the armed forces, and ideally, where are they in relation to each other? And he wants to see, are there patterns or configurations of the order of battle that have an impact on their outcome? And my question is, how big an effort would it be to enable Watson to help that student?
That's a great question. So one of the things we have struggled with is that one of my hypotheses was this will end up saving human time in terms of answering questions. But there is an upfront cost, 5 really smart people doing all of this work, putting in knowledge and training Watson. So the question you're asking is, just how much effort is required? And I can give you one estimate. This is an estimate we worked out relatively recently in a different conversation. Our estimate is that there were about 2,000 hours of work done by the students in last year's computational creativity class to create those 6 demos. So that's about 1 person a year. So if that's as much effort is required to get Watson to a point where it can start doing something useful and interesting for you. Then if you have a larger knowledge base, for example, EOL this time is way larger. We are talking about terabytes of information versus just 500 biology articles. In that case, I expect, now the students in the residential computational creativity class don't know this either, but we are expecting them to put even more than 2,000 hours of work into it. And some of you are here, so I feel wary about saying that up front, but it will require about 2-3 person years worth of effort to get there.
I think it also depends on what the files are. What's the nature of the documents that would have that information in it? Because Watson expects natural language documents.
Well, at one level, it would be books, sitting on a shelf in a library. On one hand, there are probably a few databases out there where someone has assembled some orders of battle. Lord knows where that may be. I mean, from my perspective, it's a hard problem, but you gave me the answer I was asking.
Yeah. Yes.
So in the computational creativity class, you constrained the students as to biologically inspired design in Watson. I'm wondering if you have any reflections on how creative the students were in coming up with their applications and what effect Watson had either in restricting or encouraging that creativity.
That's a good question. Bradley, do you want to answer it? Because you certainly went beyond biological inspired design. So although we initially said, please start, so as you know, in teaching these courses, there is a balance between two things. If we don't provide any structure at all, then students wander all over the place. If we provide too much structure, then we constrain them. So what we did in last year's class was, for the first half of the class, we said, please stick with biological inspired design, which provided some structure. But in the second half, we opened it up, and they could do other things. The Bradley's demo was an example of, they shifted to agriculture from biological inspired design. So in that sense, they were not constrained at all.
So I'm thinking of, you have to hammer everything that looks like a nail situation, and whether Watson was force-fit to any of those, or whether, in fact, it acted as a stimulus to expanding solutions.
Here is my sense. I don't have a quantitative answer for that. This is a hard question, so if you want to take it, it's fine with me. But here is my sense that some of the teams succeeded in building a really good conversation with Watson. So when they were conversation with Watson, and the students started with one question, and by the end of the session ended up with a completely different question, I thought those were creative projects, successful projects. If on the other hand, there were also some projects, although they were Android and they were sort of nifty looking, the real action was very limited. You could ask a question, Watson would give an answer. There, at least from my perspective, there was not much creativity that came in there, student creativity. So one final thing, we have lots of good students, but we are always looking for smart students. So if you're interested in Watson or human-computer co-creativity or computational creativity, come talk to me and go and talk to them and join us. Thank you.